right, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Zen Dads, from chaos to peace-ish. I'm super excited to be here with you today for a couple reasons. Number one, I'm really excited to be here with this group of people, men, fathers, husbands, whose goal it is to make themselves better and make the people around them better and be the best version of themselves. This is the environment that I belong in. I love being surrounded by people who are just trying to make themselves and the world a little bit better. So I'm super excited about that. The other reason I'm excited to be here is because I get to teach again. And so for those of you that don't know me, I've always wanted to be a teacher. So much so that when I was in middle school, actually one of my science teachers asked me if I wanted to teach a lab to my entire class throughout the day one day, and I did it. And ever since then, I've been hooked on teaching. And so I went all the way through college and went right out of college and got a teaching job. And I did that. I taught middle school science for 7 years. And I coached high school basketball. And there was aspects of it that I really liked, specifically the connection piece with the students, with the staff. But I realized after a few years that it really wasn't a good fit for me. And so I decided that I couldn't continue to be a teacher. And I'd be lying if I said that I didn't feel a little bit like a failure. I mean, this was my childhood dream and I was walking away from it. But nonetheless, I decided that I was going to get into real estate, because I wasn't happy as a teacher. So this was going to fix everything. I was going to make a bunch of money. I was going to be my own boss. I was going to flip houses. This was going to be awesome. And so I got into house flipping. And after about 3 years, I failed miserably. I lost a ton of money. And after 3 years, I just had to tuck my tail in between my legs and admit this wasn't working. But I said, you know what? I've got my real estate license. So I'm just going to become a realtor, help other people buy and sell houses. This is going to fix everything. This is how I'll prove that I'm successful. And after 2 years of that, once again, it was a massive failure. Everybody was confused. Are you an investor? Are you a realtor? I don't get it. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a strategy. And so after 2 years of that, once again, I failed. And so at this point in my life, I had just spent the last decade plus trying all of these things that I thought would make me happy and just failing over and over and over again. And so at this time, inside, I felt like a complete failure. I felt like I was all alone and nobody understood what I was going through. I felt like I had this pressure on my shoulders because at this time in my life, I had 2 kids now. So I had a wife and 2 kids. I had to provide for them, but I was completely defeated. And the funny part about this is I was actually really good at covering it up. So nobody outside really knew what was going on inside, right? I was projecting an image of happiness and joy and fulfillment and all of these things, but inside, I was dying. And it's a really tough place to be in because I knew that my wife and kids loved me and my wife was very supportive of me, but I just didn't think that I had the strength to deal with the expectations and the responsibilities and just, all of this pressure that was on me. And so one day it led me to laying on my bed, just sobbing all alone, just completely defeated. And once again, nobody had any idea that I was going through all of this, but I was laying on this bed just completely defeated. And, all I could say to myself was, there's so much pressure on me. Nobody understands me. But at the same time, I was a big boy, right? I had to keep it all in. I had to figure this out on my own. And so I was so prepared to die on this lonely little hill that I just refused to ask for help. And the fact of the matter is I was ready to give up. But somehow in that moment, my mindset shifted in an instant. Call it intuition or God or the universe or whatever you want to call it. But rather than giving up in that moment, I decided that I was going to figure this out. I was not going to let my wife and my kids down. I was going to figure this out. And so as I stood up off the bed that afternoon, I put a little chip on my shoulder and I said, no one's going to stop me. I am going to be successful. I'm going to prove to them and prove to myself that I can make this work. And so I made a choice that day to keep going. And, at that time in my life, when, I said, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to prove that to them that I can be a success, prove to myself. And what I meant by that was I was going to make more money than I ever thought I could make. And I was going to buy the big fancy house up on the hill. And so I set out on my new journey. I started reading lots of new books. I was, on business, on negotiation and personal development. I started seeing coaches and going to seminars and doing all of these things. And so I started to develop a lot of new skills. And so over the next few years, I was able to build this really successful real estate business. I brought a team on and was making more money than I ever thought. And then one day I bought the big fancy house up on the hill. And it's kind of odd because immediately after buying that house, I fell into a depression. And I remember standing in my dining room one day, looking out the back door, and we have this really nice view of the mountains, and I'm looking out over the mountains, and I'm wondering what the heck is wrong with me. I finally got everything that I thought I wanted. I reached the pinnacle only to be depressed when I get there. Like, what is going on with me? And then it hit me. You see, all those years ago, when I put that little chip up on my shoulder, while it may have saved my life in that moment, and while it may have created lots of success in my life, it was now stopping me from becoming the most successful version of myself. It was actually holding me back. This chip on my shoulder was holding me back because I had been pursuing external success this whole time. And I thought that that's what was going to make me happy. But of course, I was wrong. And so that's when I realized that I actually had to go within if I was going to find the kind of success that I really wanted in my life. And so this was the turning point in my life. And here's the thing. My story is not unique. I mean, there's people all over the place, maybe some people on this call who spend years, if not a lifetime, going out trying to accomplish this BHAG, this big, hairy, audacious goal, just to find out that when they get there, they're not any happier. See, oftentimes, our external success comes at the expense of our internal fulfillment because we don't really understand why we're pursuing what we're pursuing. You guys with me on that? So good. So once I realized that I had to go inward, that's when the real work began for me. Because then I could start putting the pieces together and I could start clarifying what true success actually meant to me. So today, and I just want to start out by saying that my life is not perfect. And there's still challenges and things that I run into and challenges that I face and all of that. But what I've learned is that the more I play with life and the more that I clarify what I want and why I want it, and the more that I prioritize my energy, the more fulfilled I am. And that makes all of the work completely worth it. But here's the best part. This is 100% possible for you too. And so that's why I created the playground, which we're going to talk more about here in a minute. I want to help you find fulfillment on your journey. And that's what this work is all about. And that's why we're here today. So whether you're still trying to find, some kind of success in your life, maybe you feel like you're not successful at all. Maybe you found some success and you're just looking to expand, or maybe you're similar to me where you kind of reach this pinnacle and it's like, okay, what's next? How can I go deeper? No matter the case, this work is for you because I know that you have the power to find fulfillment and create your most successful self. Now, being a dad can be overwhelming at times. Yes? Do you agree? Yes? Okay. It can be all-consuming at times. Yes? And it can make us want to give up sometimes. Sometimes. Yes? Okay, I get it. That's why I created Zen Dads. It's designed to help professional men who feel like they have this weight on their shoulders to figure out how to find more fulfillment in their life again. See, my chosen purpose in life is to inspire fathers like you and me to become so successful internally that fulfillment and external success just becomes a natural product of the work that we're doing. A couple months ago, I was standing in a motel in Florida and I was on the little railing and the rain was coming down and I watched a raindrop hit the ground. And I just remember thinking how insignificant this one little raindrop seemed as it hit the ground. But then as I looked out and I just see all this water just rushing down the parking lot into a little sewer drain, I'm thinking, man, that one little raindrop seems so insignificant. But when you put a whole bunch of these raindrops together, they create this giant torrent. They have a massive impact. And so my purpose ultimately is to create a torrent with you guys, right? One person may seem insignificant, but together we can have a massive impact on the world. So I'm trying to create a bunch of raindrops here that are going to create a torrent of awesomeness, because in the end, my hope here is that you become so successful, however you want to define that, that you choose to go out and help others do the exact same thing for themselves. You guys with me? All right, I like it. So over the next 30 minutes, we're just going to hit some high points of the work here. And I want you to walk away with three big things. Number one, I want you to understand that you can play with life and still provide for your family, or provide whatever that means to you. And you can create external success. So you can play and create external success. Number two, I want you to understand that you can silence your inner critic through clarity. And then number three, I want you to understand that you can take back control of your life through prioritization. You guys ready to get started? Let's do this thing, some jazz hands. All right. So before we begin, is there somebody here who's willing to share something that they're struggling with right now? As a father, as a man, a husband, or whatever, is there something that you're struggling with right now? Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing, you guys. I mean, we only took a few ideas here. We could have continued to easily, fill up this board. There's a lot of things that we struggle with as men, as fathers, and just looking at these three things, having to be present with our family and our friends, but at the same time, we have all this pressure to perform, and we're supposed to stay strong and not show any signs of weakness, right? This is only a few of them, but just these three, who can relate in some way, shape, or form to all three of these? Right, all of us can, right? These are pretty common things for us to struggle with as husbands and fathers and men. So how do we find a solution to these problems? Well, think about the scientific method. The way the scientific method works is the first thing we do is we identify a problem. Here's the problem. Then we start doing some research to discover more about the problem so that we can create an educated guess about what we think a solution might be. That's called the hypothesis. We have a problem, we do some research, we create an educated hypothesis, then we start doing some experiments, and then we get some kind of results from the experiments, and based on those results, we create a conclusion, and then based on the conclusion, we create knowledge. So if I'm a scientist and I do an experiment over and over and over again, and I keep getting the same result over and over and over, and then I do the same experiment again, what result should I get? The same result, yes? Yeah. So as a scientist, if I want to grow and expand my knowledge, then I have to change the experiment. I have to try something new, yes? So if I'm a productive scientist, then I'm constantly playing with new ideas, right? And creating new hypotheses, yes? Right. Well, the same is true for our life. If we do the same experiment, if we play the same game every single day, we're going to get the same results. But if we play with new ideas and create new hypotheses, then we grow and we expand. And so that's what the playground is all about. That's what I mean when I say we can play with life and still be productive and still create external success if that's what we want. So this process, the playground, as I call it, is essentially the scientific method of personal development. You guys with me here? All right, perfect. So here it is. And yes, this is kind of a rudimentary drawing of it, but this is what it is. So it's 10 different segments, okay? There's 10 different segments that all circle around this key part right in the middle. Because the objective in the end is to find fulfillment. It's to find our most successful self. It is to find our purpose. It is to be able to pay it forward, to have passion, to have growth, to develop as people. And so these 10 components work to dial us into the center. So the more that we play with these ideas, the more that we find fulfillment, the closer we get to our most successful self, the more passion that we have. You guys with me on this? Okay, great. So there's 4 pieces to it. There's exploration, then imagination, play, and then finally discovery. And so we're going to dive into each 4 of these components just fairly quickly here, but we'll come back to some of them here in other parts as well. So the first part is exploration. So if someone is an explorer, or if someone is exploring, what kind of mindset do they have? Yeah, that's right. They're going to have an open mindset, right? You have to have an open mindset to explore. You can't really explore if you're closed off. It kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? So if we're going to explore our lives, we have to do so with an open mind. And so exploration and having an open mind becomes the foundation of this whole work, right? Because if we have an open mind while we're exploring, then we're going to discover eventually what our core values are, right? If we're open, we're going to dig down, we're going to find our core values. And when we know what our core values are, then we can pursue things that fulfill us. Yes? You guys with me on this? So in order to find our core values and all of these things, it takes intention, right? We have to work at it. So the way we do that is, first thing we have to do is we have to define what we want. Okay, and we'll talk more about this piece here in just a minute, but we got to define clearly what it is we want, and then we have to align it. Why is that important to us? And then once we know what we want and why we want it, then we have to figure out what starts getting in our way. And so this becomes the foundation for the work, because if we know what we want, and if we know why we want it, and we're really tapped into our core values, and we know what's been getting in the way in the past, then we have a foundation to really start playing with some new ideas and start moving ourselves forward. So, excuse me. So once again, exploration with an open mind and having that alignment, knowing what I want and why I want it, and having an open mind, those are the foundations to get us started. So the next piece is imagination. So with our imagination, we are creating clarity here. So we know we have alignment, we know what we want and why we want it, we know what's been getting in our way. Now we got to start clarifying what we think we want to create. We're going to create a hypothesis. I think that if I do this, then this is going to happen. Okay, in this section, we're also going to be visualizing. We're going to be visualizing our future, visualizing ourselves already creating what we want to create. We're going to be making an intrinsic commitment to moving forward and trying something new. And so this is where we set our intention. The third component of this is play. And, you know, it's funny, I did the same thing, right? When I was at my low point, I started with a desire. I want to be successful. And I said, here's how I'm going to do it. And I skipped all this fun stuff over here. So you can see how that created a problem, right? Because here's what I want. Here's how I'm going to create it. I didn't understand why I wanted to create it. I didn't know what was working in the background of my mind. And so when I actually created it, I wasn't fulfilled. I made it happen, but I wasn't fulfilled. And this happens a lot. We just go, what do I want to create? Boom, I'm going to go create it, right? And so when we get into this play piece, it's really important that we do all the necessary work first before we start creating our game plan. Okay, and once we create our game plan, we know all of these things. We have a game plan that is not only going to get us to our goals, but it's also, we know that it's aligned with what we truly want, right? So it's a powerful game plan. The next thing is priorities. And I'm going to talk more about this in a second as well. This is where we focus our time and our energy onto the things that we want to create. Because if we're not focused, then it's going to be really hard for us to move forward and create the results that we want to see. And then finally, in the play section, we've got execution. You know, so it's really important that we don't get stuck aiming when we're getting ready to play. We do all this work, we learn all this stuff, we create this awesome hypothesis, the game plan's crushing it. You know, we are focused, we're ready to go. We're focused, we're ready to go. We're focused, we're ready to go, right? And we get stuck aiming. We don't want to get stuck there. So execution, the execution piece is all about faith and trust And whatever outcome comes doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the outcome is, because no matter what it is, it's just a result. And so we have to have faith and trust that we have what it takes to just go out and execute it. And we just have to get it out there, just go and make it happen. And then finally, we get to discover. And this is where we get the results. We see what happened. How did it come together? Did the results align with the hypothesis? Was I, where was I right? Where was I wrong? How can I refine this process? And then finally, we get to make a choice. So we draw some conclusions, and it's kind of like, okay, here's the results. Here's what happened. Then we make a choice about what we're going to do next. And then we create a new desire, and then we go through this thing again. And we can use this process for big goals or little goals, a daily goal, a lifetime goal. We can use it for as big or as little of a goal as you'd like to have set. The whole point is we're playing. This is what I think is going to happen. What happened? Oh, this is what happened. Okay, this is what I think is going to happen. Here's what actually happened. And the more that we do this, the more that we discover about ourselves, the more clarity we bring to who we are and what we want to create, the more fulfilled we will be, you will be, and the more successful you will be, however you define that for yourself. So hopefully you're starting to see that as we play with this stuff, and as we're just open to any outcome and just play with new ideas and just welcome in the experience, that instead of focusing on just getting the results, right, we're kind of open to the whole experience, then we open ourselves up to the discovery of our most successful self. So who here on this call likes sports, likes to play sports, played sports growing up? All right, what were some of the sports that you guys played? Oh, okay, basketball, great. All right, so you love playing basketball, yes? Okay, so was there ever a time when you were playing basketball and it seemed like the fun just kind of vanished? It just wasn't fun anymore. You ever been there? Yeah? Okay, can you tell us a little bit about what happens to your game? What does the basket look like? What does the ball feel like in your hands when you're not having fun anymore? Yeah, exactly. The ball feels clumsy, it feels slick, the hoop looks this big, you're not sure where to move, everything's clunky, you're in your own head, right? All of these things. It makes it very hard to play the game when we're not in flow with it. Yes? All right. Conversely, what happens when you're in your zone? You're playing basketball and you are in your zone. What does the ball feel like? What does the hoop look like? What's happening there? Yeah, exactly. The exact opposite of that, right? I mean, it just feels like you can do no wrong. You know exactly where to be. Everything's dropping, when to pass it, when to take it. I mean, you're in a flow. Yeah. So the same is true for our life. When we stop looking at life as this obstacle that we need to overcome and be conquered, and the more that we start looking at life as just a game that's full of choices and opportunities, and we just have fun again and play, then we get it back into the flow of life, and things just kind of come together for us. You guys with me on this? All right, awesome. See, I don't know about you guys, but I hear a lot of people out there talking about, 10x your business, 10x your life, 10x your whatever, 10x everything, right? And if you 10x everything, then you're going to be happy because you'll have all of these things. And what I'm telling you is that you already have everything that you need right within you. You can already find fulfillment. It's already right within you. So you don't need to 10x shit. You just need to play with life and continue to grow. And fulfillment will be a natural byproduct of that. If you do that, you will find fulfillment. And not only that, you'll find more success, however you define that, because you will learn what success means to you, and you will start pursuing it and making it happen. All right. So we're going to move on to the second part here. So I'm going to start out with a question. Who is the one person that gets in the way of our success the most? Okay, yes, ourselves, right? But what part of ourselves really gets in the way? Yeah, our critic. It's our critic, right? Our critic is the one that shows up when we screw something up, when we make a mistake, right? And it comes out and goes, see, you did it again. And so our critic can make us feel small. It can make us feel weak. So why? Why do we do this to ourselves, right? Well, here's the reality. Our critic can really help us or it can hurt us. It just depends on our relationship with the critic, because our inner critic is driven by our ego. So it's really meant to protect us from being hurt, right? It keeps us safe from ridicule and embarrassment externally, right? So if we look good outwardly, then we can't be ridiculed. So our ego and our critic is kind of like, hey, don't do that because you don't want to look bad, right? So it's meant to try and keep us safe. And so our critic knows very well when we are not meeting our potential out there. Yes? And it'll let us know. Well, here's the other thing. Our critic knows when we are not living up to our potential internally as well. And the fact of the matter is, it'll let us know that too. So in other words, our critic knows when we're full of shit. It knows when we're not aligned. And so when our critic is running the show, we really have two choices. We tend to build two different shadows for ourselves when the critic is running the show. The first shadow would be overcompensation, right? Our critic is chirping at us saying, you can't do it, you can't do it, you can't do it. So we overcompensate and go, oh yeah, watch this, hold my beer, and we overcompensate. And so, which is exactly what I did. The other way that shadow that a lot of people will lean into when the critic starts chirping, you can't do this, you can't do this, is they'll start to, pull back. Because if I don't put myself out there, then I'm safe, right? Nobody can ridicule me. Nobody can get after me. I can't be embarrassed. And if I'm going out and crushing it, I can't be embarrassed there either. And so those are typically two of the biggest ways that people fight against the critic. And once again, it's our critic trying to keep us safe, just in a really kind of messed up way, right? So there's two ways to silence our inner critic. Okay, the first way is to fight it, which is kind of what I was just talking about. And sometimes fighting our critic can be very effective. When I fought my inner critic, it was very effective in creating success, right? But the problem is I was very unhappy and I was unfulfilled. But I felt inferior, and so I overcompensated. And I just said, let me show you how you're wrong, critic. Watch this, right? You can't stop me. Here I go. You guys ever been there before? Anybody here ever been there before? Yeah. We could spend an entire lifetime trying to prove this little a-hole wrong inside of ourselves under the guise of success. Because if I create this, then nobody can ridicule me, and just be miserable the whole time. Yeah? Anybody? Yeah, right. So what are some things that you guys specifically have been chasing, or not you guys specifically, men in general, men, fathers, husbands, right? What are some things that a lot of us chase thinking they're going to silence our critic, right? What are the things that we can obtain or do that should make us feel successful? I'm going to write down a few things here. What suggestions you guys have? All right, great. This is a fantastic list. And just like before, we could have continued to add more things to this list. But, fame, money, house, big fancy house, a happy family. We've got our kids in good schools. We've got the great job. We've got a hot wife. We've got the car, the boat. We're crushing it strong. We're confident. That's a big list there, right? And our mind says that if we do all of these things, then we're going to feel fulfilled. Yes? You guys with me? Because we're fulfilling our duties as a man. Anyone ever heard this message before? Listen, man, as soon as you 10X and you get this and this and this and you're crushing it and all these things, then you're going to be happy. You're going to be fulfilled. Anybody ever heard that before? Right? Well, here's the problem. Our critic is never satisfied with that because number one, our critic's more stubborn than we are. And number two, like I said before, our critic knows when we're full of shit and when we feel inadequate. And so we're chasing a bottomless pit. If we're just going after these things that are outside of ourselves, we're going to just keep getting more and more and more, and it's still not going to fulfill us because that's not what we really want. They're nice. They're good. I'm not saying they're bad and we shouldn't go after these, but if it's all we're going after, it's a bottomless pit. And our critic's going to say, good job. Still not good enough. Better go get some more. Better go get some more. Right? Now, the good thing about this is that if we create all of these things, if we get all of these things, it does actually serve a purpose. And the purpose is that it keeps us safe from ridicule and embarrassment from outsiders. No one can criticize us if we are living the American dream. If we are crushing it and we have all of these things, then no one out there can criticize us. So that piece of the puzzle is actually pretty accurate. The critic has protected us from that. But at the same time, our critic's not fooled. It knows that we still have some work to do. And so he's going to let us know about that too. So the second way to silence the inner critic is to create alignment. So if we have clarity on what we want and why we want it, then we are aligned. And when we are aligned, we have the confidence to stand up to our inner critic in a healthy way, right? If we know what we want and we know why we want it, then we can stand up to just about anyone and anything, including our inner critic, and we can do it in a healthy way. You guys with me on this? So here's the concept. Anybody here ever studied judo? No? Okay. Well, I did when I was younger. I studied judo for a couple of years. And, one of the things that always stuck with me was just how to use the energy of an opponent to my advantage. And so this applies just the same to our inner critic. Our inner critic is a very powerful tool. And if we're constantly fighting it, then it's going to win every single time. But when we learn to work with it and use its energy to our benefit, then it becomes a very powerful ally. You guys with me? So how do we do that? So once again, what I've discovered is that when we clearly know what we want and why we want it, which means we're aligned, then our critic has no choice but to get in line with us because we're confident, we're steadfast, we're convicted. You guys with me? All right. So if I say, I want $1 million, and then we start digging into, well, why do you want $1 million? Why do you want it? Eventually we might get down to like something like security. And so if we find out what you really want is security, then we can start asking different questions. Well, what does security mean to you? How can we create more security in your life? It might not just be $1 million because you might make $1 million and still not feel secure. You guys with me on this? Right? So we want to find out what you really want. Okay. And so one of the ways to do that is to ask why. I want $1 million. Why? Because then I can protect, I'll be here with my family will be safe if I have $1 million. Well, why will your family be safe? Well, because we'll have a nice house and a nice neighborhood and nice schools. Okay, well, why is that important to you? Well, because I don't want them to get hurt. Well, why don't you want them to be hurt? Because I want to be secure, right? That's an example of something that I call the why hole. We start with a big idea. I want $1 million. And then we whittle it down with the question of why, until eventually we get down to core values. Because once you start understanding what your core values are, then you're going to be able to start aligning with those core values, which is then going to create conviction within you, which is going to create confidence. And when we have conviction and confidence, we can validate our critic's arguments, but not buy into them. So our critic might start saying, I don't know if you should do that. I don't know if you should do that. But if we're convicted, if we are aligned, if we know exactly what we want at a deep level and it's aligned with our core values, then we might take the little voice and say, yeah, that makes sense, or it doesn't. We get to choose, right? We're no longer resisting what the critic is trying to tell us. We know what we want. We're confident. We're steadfast in what we want. And so at this point, that means our critic really only has one choice: to get on board. And the cool thing about this is now our critic chimes in and starts chirping at us, right? And our critic can keep us honest instead of small. He can keep us motivated, right? And he can do that without making us overcompensate. So our inner critic becomes a partner, as a partner and part of our intuition, instead of something that we're fighting. Is this making sense? So, okay, good. So our critic loses its negative power because we're not fighting it and because we're not buying into the nonsense. All right. So at the beginning of this, I had told you about how I spent many years manhandling my critic. And I want to point out again that I was successful in doing that. I created all of these things, but I was still miserable because I was just trying to prove everybody else wrong and trying to prove my critic wrong, and it was exhausting and it was unfulfilling. The cool thing is that when you get to play with life, when you get in alignment, when you know your why, when you know your what, you're going to care much less about the negative feedback from your critic. You're going to care much more about the constructive feedback, and you get to work together with your critic as a team instead of fighting against yourself all the time. How does that sound? Does that sound pretty cool if you could not be fighting against yourself all the time, right? So the best way to silence your inner critic is really just to make it a partner. Define very clearly what you want and why you want it. Ask that question why over and over and over again to get down to your core values so that you can be steadfast in what you're trying to create. And then your critic has no choice but to get on board because you know what you want. And so when we're unclear, our critic runs the show. And we usually either overcompensate or dial it back. We fall back into old patterns that don't serve us. But when we bring clarity to our what and our why, our inner critic has no choice but to hop on board. So the third thing that I want to talk about today is how to take back control of your time and your energy. And what I should be saying in this piece is how to take back the choice in every facet of your life, how to take back the choice in every decision that you make. So if I'm in alignment, like we were just talking about, and I'm aware of my actions, if I know what I want and why I want it, and I'm aware of my actions, I have choices. I have control. If I'm unaware of my actions and I'm not in alignment, then my critic runs the show and my choices are made for me. I don't have any control at this point, right? Because now my subconscious is running for me because I don't really pay attention to my actions and I'm not really aligned with what I want to do. And so I'm just kind of willy-nilly all over the place. Our ego is in full control at that time. You guys with me on this? Excuse me. All right. So if we want to take back control of our time and energy, there's three things that we need to focus on. The first thing is we need to find the leaks in our boat. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is a leak in our boat is a place in our life where we are wasting time and energy, right? These are places where we keep ourselves trapped in old patterns. We're using up time and energy on things that could otherwise, that aren't really serving us and could otherwise be used for something much more productive. So we have to identify what's been getting in the way of creating what we want. So these things, they're distractions, okay? It could be TV, it could be emotional distractions, it could be mental distractions, it could be social media, it could be long-winded conversations till 3 a.m, it could be drinking, it could be eating. Anything that we do in our life that is keeping us trapped in an old pattern and taking time and energy away from what we want to create, these are the leaks in our boat. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to become aware of our leaks in the boat. Okay, and I'll just touch on this really quick. So there's physical leaks in the boat, which would be things like TV and could be sports and that kind of stuff. It could be social media, and then there's mental, which is going to be things like negative self-talk, repetitive patterns, just kind of cycling through these. This is what this can't happen. I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to happen. Those kinds of things. And then there's emotional leaks in the boat or distractions, things like anger, depression, feeling sorry for ourselves. That takes a lot of energy and time to sink into those. And we could, once we become aware of those, we could take that energy away from those and go apply them to things that are going to make our lives better. Right? So living in these distractions can be exhausting. No wonder we don't have the time to create the life that we want or the energy that we need to create the life that we want, because we're distracting ourselves, right? So in order to take back control, we have to first identify and become aware of the distractions, the leaks in our boat. Okay? The things we're allowing to take time and energy away from us so that we, instead of putting it somewhere productive. The second thing we need to do is we need to prioritize. So now we know, all right, I've got, these distractions, mental, emotional, and physical, right? And now we need to prioritize. Which ones do I want to keep and which ones am I willing to let go? So for me personally, basketball is a distraction. It's non-negotiable. Basketball is not going anywhere. I'm going to keep basketball as a distraction in my life forever because I enjoy it and I have my reasons, right? But then there's other things like negative self-chatter. I just caught myself in this the other day. You know, you don't have enough time. You don't have enough time. You're never going to get it all done. You're never going to get it all done, right? And once I became aware of it, I could then address it and start changing that pattern. And so I prioritized, basketball and said, I'm going to keep this one. And I said, this negative self-chatter, I want to work on, and I want to remove it. So next we prioritize, where do we want to put our time and energy so that we have the time and energy to create our most successful self. And so what we're going to do is we're going to eliminate a couple things that we can eliminate to help you prioritize. Number one, eliminate what you can't control. You may not like the president, but you did your part. Now you can't do anything about it. So maybe it's time to let it go. Maybe the 3-hour conversation with somebody that completely disagrees with you, or neither one of you are going to change your mind. Maybe that's not a good use of your time and your energy, right? The poor attitude of somebody else, or judgments and things like that. You can't control what other people are doing. So maybe that's not a good place to put your time and energy. So by prioritizing, we can look at the things that we do have control over, and we can choose to keep those or remove those. If we can't control the outcome, just get rid of it. Stop wasting time, stop wasting energy on it, because it's stopping you from creating your most successful self. Okay, and then eliminate everything that's not important to you. If it is important to you, like basketball is to me, then keep it. If it's not important, eliminate it. If it's not serving you, eliminate it. Okay, so this part is about consciously prioritizing. And the word is consciously, which means we need to be aware of them, which means we need to make a list of all of our distractions that we have and consciously analyze each and every one and say, I'm going to keep it, I'm going to lose it, I'm going to keep it, I'm going to lose it, so that we know what we value, so that we have our priorities spread out. And then the third thing that we need to do, we know what our distractions are, we've prioritized the ones that we want to keep around, we're eliminating the other ones. And then third, we have to focus. We have to focus our time and energy on our priorities. Take the focus away from all the stuff that we don't want in our lives, from all those distractions, and just focus on what we want to create. Because if we focus on, I don't want to be angry, I'm going to be angry. You with me on this? Yes? So we want to focus on, I want to be happy. I want to be fulfilled. I want to play basketball. Whatever it is, we focus on what we want to create, and we just remove the focus from the things that we don't want to create. So by finding leaks in our boat, then prioritizing our time, and then focusing on the priorities in your life, you will take back control, and you will take back your ability to choose the life that you want to live. You start putting that time and energy into the things that you want to create, and all of a sudden the pieces will start falling into place. So, once again, I mentioned this earlier, there's so many people out there telling us to add more on our plate, the 10X thing, right? Do more, do more, do more. And I'm telling you that if you want to create your most successful self, do less. Yeah, who wants to do less? Yes, right? Let's do less. Let's just do it way more efficiently. And so that's what this whole piece is all about. It's about prioritizing our time and our energy. So I'll wrap this up here in just a few minutes with a Q&A. But before we do that, I just want to touch on one last thing. Because one of the most common questions that I get is, it's in some form or another, really? I mean, can we really just play with life and we're going to find more fulfillment? And the answer is yes. Yes, absolutely. As long as you follow a strategy and do it with intention, which is what the playground is all about, absolutely yes. The more you play with life, play with new ideas, have fun with it, the more creativity is going to open up for you, and the more everything is going to open up to you, and the more fulfillment you will find. I'm working with people right now who are going through really tough transitions in their life. And by going through this work, they're finding tremendous clarity. And the cool thing is, as they find that clarity, their vision becomes more clear. And as their vision becomes more clear, they start creating more of what they want and finding more fulfillment. That's how this works. We create clarity, we prioritize, and then we just start taking action. And all of a sudden, boom, holy cow, all these pieces start falling into place. So if this is resonating with you and you want to get more information about the coaching program, just click on the link that I'll put in the chat box here and sign up for a free 20-minute clarity call where, on this call, we're going to talk about your specific challenges, what's happening for you and what questions do you have. And then after this call, you can make a choice. Is this a program that's a good fit? And if it is, then we'll move forward from there. And so keep in mind that today was really just a quick rundown of the work. In the 10-week program, the 10-week program, the coaching program, we're going to deep dive into, all 10 of these sections plus this middle section here. And we're going to work together to help you, number one, create clarity on your what and your why. What do you really want and why do you really want it? That's item number one. Right? Then we'll work to prioritize your time and your energy so that you have the time and the energy you need to create your version of success. Then we're going to put a plan in place to help you achieve that. And we're just going to keep playing, learning, and growing as we continue to go through the playground process. So ultimately, this work is intended to help you find fulfillment and success in a chaotic world. That's what it's all about. That's what it's here for. That's what I'm here for, to help you find success in a chaotic world. So picture a day when the weight of the world is lifted from your shoulders and you feel invigorated again. Right? Picture a day when those closest to you, whether it's family or friends or whatever, come up and tell you how inspired they are by your growth. Picture a day when you have all the freedom you need and the time and the energy and the tools that you need to live your most successful life. This is possible for you. So if this is resonating with you, then click on the link and schedule your 20-minute call, and we'll go from there. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to Q&A. Great questions, guys. I appreciate you being so open and honest and really bringing some great questions to the table. Before we wrap things up here, I'm just going to leave you with this one last story. My father-in-law passed away recently, and him and I had a relationship that I would call tumultuous. And, he kind of criticized me a lot, but it was a lot of like backhanded criticizing, right? I knew that he cared, but he would just never really admit that he was proud of me, or that, he thought I was doing a good job as a father and a husband and all that kind of stuff. Well, he recently passed away. And 2 days before he died, he called me into his room, and, he could barely talk. And he waved me over, and I came over, and he just said, "Dan, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I think that you're a good father. You've been a good husband to my daughter. And I just want you to know that I appreciate you." And man, it was so impactful for me. I wish that he would have said it sooner. But here's the question. I mean, for him, it took him up until 2 days to finally open up to all of the people around him and really say what he wanted to say and be the person that he wanted to be. It took him right up until the last moments of his life. So the question is, are you willing to wait until you either have no choice or it's too late before you finally start making the changes to truly fulfill yourself, to fill your cup? It may be morbid to think about, but the fact of the matter is, tomorrow may not come. So now is the time to start the work. Now is the time to take back control. Now is the time to start living your most successful self. I can't wait to get started with you guys and help you along that journey and help you discover fulfillment in your life and help you discover your most successful self. Once again, I want to thank you guys for being here today. I hope you have a fantastic day. Here's to your journey, my friends. I'll catch you guys later.